Bienvenidos a un capítulo más de Diálogos Sensoriales. En esta ocasión estaremos viajando a Estados Unidos, aunque probablemente vía Francia. Entonces voy a platicar con una querida colega que ya tiene un poco de tiempo que nos conocemos, Isabelle Lesschaeve, y pues empezaremos platicando con Isabel. Isabel, thank you so much for accepting this interview and sharing your time speaking about your sensory experience in the sensory field.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you for the invite, Ivan.
Okay, so let's start with our traditional question, but in two parts, maybe in your case. How did your interest in sensory evaluation and why it begin? Is there a particular moment or influence?
Well, I guess there are several moments, but being French and growing up in the food and wine culture, wine has always been part of, my life.
Right.
And What I wanted to do after college, I wanted to work in the wine industry. However, it didn't work out for several reasons, timing mostly, and location. But I ended up doing a food science degree and worked at the INRA Flavor Research Lab in Dijon. So INRA is the National Institute of Agronomical Research in France. And my internship was to work on strawberry jam and the influence of sweeteners on the flavor of strawberry jam.
Okay.
So I spent my whole summer making jams, extracting flavors, and doing a lot of chemistry. But the last point of the project was to do tasting with the sensory evaluation team in the lab. And then I worked with Dr. Sylvie Sanchou and her team, and I discovered, working with people. And I was just like, you know what, flavor chemistry, that's really not what I want to do all my life, being in a lab, being, exposed to solvent, doing a lot of, experimentations like that. I want to be with people. So I did the end of my internship working on sensory. I learned a lot from Sylvie, and then a job opened up and I stayed there for 10 years, and that's how everything started. And
Nice.
wine has always been part of it, but in different ways.
Right. And at what moment you decide to move into let's say American continent, because you
Yeah,
were in Canada as well. So was that decision difficult?
of course it was difficult, yes. But like any decision, you have to look at, the pros and the cons, what's in for me, what I'm going to lose.
Mhm.
And it was at the end of my PhD, so I stayed overall 10 years in Sylvie's team at INRA, and I was able to do my PhD research at the same time I was doing a lot of panel leading work.
Right.
And after my PhD, I had had a lot of questions about my career, and then I had this opportunity to interview for a job in North America, in California, to work
Mhm.
at E&J Gallo Winery now. And they hired me. And so they made an offer. And now you have to make the decision, should I stay or should I go?
Right.
And yes, it was difficult. I'm an only child. My parents, were, they had difficult conversations, but at the end, it was an opportunity that if I didn't go, I would regret. So I just went and said, well, I would stay for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I might come back. And 27 years later, I'm still around.
Wow. Well, that decision makes now your career, and do you have like this moment when you realize that, okay, I'm in the right path? It's okay, because you started like for a short period, but now
Mm.
uh, are you aware of that time?
Well, that's a good question, Ivan. I don't think I've been really comfortable along my career. I mean, when I trained for 10 years as an academic, basically, then I moved to the industry and I had to adjust because in academia, you like to control everything. That's
Right,
that's your
yeah.
purpose. You need to control everything in order to have robust data to publish. And then in industry, you have to solve problems, and you have to help winemakers, developers to make sure that the products taste good, that they are acceptable by consumers, and we use the same methods, but not the same decision criteria. So I had to
Right.
adapt. Then I went back to academia, then back to industry. So I really didn't really feel, I'm always questioning where I stand.
Okay.
But I guess with age, you start to learn, where you feel good. And I think what I feel good is, to be able to help people. As a manager, I discovered that I was pretty good at coaching people, so helping young people develop, in their career personally and professionally. And that what I do now is helping people develop their, tasting skills and develop their sense of smell. That's now I know that this is what I want to do.
Right.
Took me some time, but eventually, you
It
figure
feels
out.
natural now, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay. What type of projects or evaluations where you work, you found those really interesting or challenging? Is there any of those that you remember that, okay, this was really, really enjoyable but hard?
Yeah. Well, many. I think when I started my career, I was really focused on sensory techniques, so working with
Mhm.
descriptive panels, and you had a sense of, anticipations, and you knew it was a long-term project, and you were making progress, 1 week after week. What threw me off is starting working with consumers, basically starting consumer projects, and you had to design everything in advance, making sure everything will be right. And you thought about everything before doing that one shot of interviewing 300 consumers.
Mhm.
And it was very stressful. So over the years, I learned, but that was the first challenge that I think I encountered in my career is, you know, how do you anticipate all that can happen when you do consumer research? But I think the most fun I have recently is using technology to learn more about consumer behavior and partnering with different companies, looking at how people express themselves using the language, analyzing the language. You can learn so much about behavior and
Mhm, mhm.
pain points and needs that consumers don't always articulate in your consumer test, but they speak, freely on social for some reasons.
Mhm.
You learn so much, and I really enjoy those projects because it was kind of having a mega focus group to help you
Right.
start thinking of different ideas and different hypotheses about how you can develop a product for these people or
Mhm.
better understand their behavior. So that's why maybe, they didn't accept your product. So you can start, thinking that through. And
Mhm.
these were very enjoyable. Yeah.
Right. And what was the major change, if there is any, that you perceive over all these years? Is the same? I mean, the protocols, or there's something that
Mhm.
is quite different?
In terms of the techniques we use, you mean?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Uh, I would say that, for pure sensory, so working, to understand sensory perceptions, perceptions of products for the senses when we work with sensory panelists. I would say we haven't changed much. We always ask the same question,
Mhm.
are the products being perceived similar or different? If they are different, in what way? And we use similar techniques of descriptive analysis. Uh, but on the consumer side, I think a lot of things have changed. The way we consider, the way we interact with people, trying to be closer to people when they consume the product, when they purchase the product. But there are certain things that more the negative side never change as well, which is people want to have fast results quickly and don't want to invest the time in proper research. And I think I spent a lot of my corporate career telling people, quick and dirty doesn't work because it's dirty at the end. And if you want to have good data, you have to invest in good methodology. You cannot cut corners all the time. That's the basic of sensory science, sensory and consumer science, is to make sure that we collect good data to inform decisions, because that's what we do as sensory scientists. We manage the risk of launching, poor products on the market. We want to make sure the products have everything, from a sensory standpoint to succeed. After that, other factors,
Yes.
have happened, marketing and all these things. But at least on the product side, we want to make sure that the products is acceptable and has all the attributes that are desirable by a consumer.
Right. Based on that, of course, in your opinion, which is the more difficult part for us sensory scientists in general? Of course, the planning part, the execution, the analysis, or the reporting of the data?
I think most of the scientists I've worked with, the biggest challenge was the reporting and go beyond the data, trying, extracting the insights, because the insights is not to say that, the difference is significant at 95% of confidence. The insights is, what does it mean for the product? How can we improve the product, or are we ready to go to the next level? And being comfortable making these recommendations, I found sensory scientists were, needed more exposure and confidence from their managers and their team that they could make these recommendations. And I think we are generally quite good at designing and executing data analysis, or, as you know, as a statistician, it's always, a challenge, but selling the results, I think that's the biggest challenge for most sensory scientists.
Right, but for many years, sensory was like, it's only the preparation of the samples and that's it. It's but nowadays it's merged more with marketing, or with this, as you mentioned, more faster results, and at the end we need to share the insights or whatever in a quick way, right?
True.
Okay, let's move a little bit and speak about wine.
All right.
What aspects of the sensory evaluation are important for the wine description?
What many wine professionals and wine enthusiasts don't realize is the importance of the sense of smell. We talk about wine tasting, but really what we are doing is smelling all the time, because wine is such an interesting medium. It's very complex, has a lot of flavors. It evolves over time as the wine warm up. Other flavors can be perceived. I would say that what is interesting is to bring this knowledge to people and experience, how they can enjoy more wine more by developing their sense of smell. And that's what I'm teaching people right now.
Nice. And where can we find your trainings or your
Well, on my website, I'm sure you're going to put that in the show notes, but InnoVinum Academy, if you search for that, you should find me.
Right. I'm asking this because for many people, wine tasting is like magic. Like I'm not able. I will not be able to find those raspberry notes or woody notes, whatever. So it's not so difficult. I mean, for the beginning, of course, the more you enter into the field, the more complex can be. But how can we enter into that field in an easy way?
Yeah, well, it's very intimidating, and I think I was speaking with a colleague this morning, and my conclusion is that the industry created a monster, basically telling people you have to be an expert to really drink wine, which is really not the best way to find consumers, is it? So, everybody's going to wine school to learn about, the different grape varieties, the different wine styles, the different regions. They even have to memorize maps to know where the different appellations are. But at the end of the day, people just want to have an experience. It's just a beverage. We
Right.
don't do that for soda, for example. But of course, it creates this magic and this impression that it's reserved for only people who know. And that's really what I'm kind of against it. I'm fighting that elitist type of model, and wine should be approachable. And there is wine, from $2 a bottle to $1,000 a bottle. So you have a wide range, and yeah, the more you go in price, maybe the wine is more difficult to apprehend, and it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
So there is a wide range of wine for a wide range of people, and at the end of the day, you have to find what you like and don't like, and don't feel ashamed if you don't like a bottle of $200. That's okay.
Wow. Right.
Or
Yeah, because
$20.
now $200 as well. But well, it's sometimes when you are seeing the wide description by an expert, they
Yeah.
start saying telling words like I don't know, palatability or something
Mhm.
complex, and that's the thing I think it's the way people is like afraid to confront, no? And
Mm.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
sensory is a way to make it easier the wine perception or
That
description.
that's what I truly believe, because you're right. Some of my clients, they were telling me, well, I attended a tasting and I shared my impressions, and then the sommelier just shut me down, saying that
Mm.
that was not true. And really, what I want is people to rediscover their senses, and how to use their senses. And the problem is that, if you remember at school, or maybe now it's different, but we don't teach people how to describe
Mhm.
what we taste and what we smell. We describe colors, we describe shapes. It's all visual and tactile, but not really, chemical senses related.
Right.
So what I'm working with people is to let them rediscover their senses, and then they discover that it's not that hard to describe, but by associating a perception with a product that I know. And that's why I love the wine aroma wheel,
Right.
to guide people in their journey to describe, to categorize what they perceive. And the whole thing, is that there is no right or wrong answer. It's really a
Correct.
question of being comfortable with your perception. So once people understand there is no right answer, they start feeling, okay, I can taste wine. And then, we train, like I would train a descriptive panel. I train them with references, and ask them to pay more attention to what they smell every day. And that's how you start building your sensory lexicon and feel more comfortable. So yes, sensory education is the way in the wine world, because you can talk about what you smell and taste and let the expert use fancy vocabulary, but
Right.
you can express what you like and yet what you don't like.
Correct. And at the end, well, you can decide it because of the price or because of
Yeah,
the type of meal you will have, right? Ah,
absolutely.
it's interesting, and well, we can speak about hours, I guess, or
Oh yes.
days. No.
We can, but
Yeah, but
I'm sure you have.
maybe with a glass of wine we can
It
share
will be
that
easier.
yes. Is there any cultural differences in wine preferences and description in for example with the French people and people from the States?
Well, yes. I think I mean, there have been some research showing cultural differences in
Mhm.
what we like, what we experience, but really you build your preferences with exposure to products. So
Mhm.
if you've been in France, if you're an American living in France and you have exposure to French wines, you will start having an appreciation for those wines that are quite different from California grown and made wine. And that's how you develop what you like and don't like in those styles. But what is interesting is that on the sensory preferences aspect is when you do preference mapping, looking at the attributes that really drive likes and dislikes for consumers.
Right.
They're usually similar segments of people liking sweet and fruity wines or liking more complex wines, and then anything in between. I think it's a matter of adjusting to understanding what really drives people to certain style of wines that the industry should be focusing on right now.
Yes, and I think you mentioned it, but what are your thoughts about these new methodologies or methods that has been used for sensory evaluation? Do you think they can complement or replace the traditional methods?
I think it's more like an aspect of complementing the traditional methods. I mean, the traditional methods have the rigor that you need, to make decisions. The other methods that are more qualitative, in a way, are great to explore. I've never really liked working with focus groups because I always thought that you can lead the conversations the way you want. So you really need to have a very skilled moderator, and you only talk to maybe 36, 40 people at a time, and you start building conclusions. But when you have the ability to do social listening and use these techniques, or even, invite people in their home and share with you on video what they are doing and what they're experiencing, I think it gives us more qualitative insights to help make the final decision with the hard data that we collect in a more controlled way. But I don't think it will replace. I've seen a lot of promise about the electronic nose and the electronic mouth and all the AI model using chemistry to predict consumer liking. And I'm curious because maybe it works, but all is presented is a black box, so you really don't know, how it works. So I'm always suspicious of black boxes. I'm a data person. I really want to see, what you put in and what you put out. You really want to understand what's happening there.
Yeah, you need prior data in order to modulate something. I mean,
exactly.
for the artificial intelligence or whatever new methodologies, you need data from elsewhere. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's change this a little bit. I will start asking you some preference questions, please.
Okay.
Tell me, which one do you prefer? Let's start with, I guess, one of the most difficult decisions.
Which one I prefer? Well, yes. I grew up in Champagne, so that's easy.
Okay. Okay. So I was about to ask you about red wine and white wine.
Okay, red wine and white wine. My main criteria is flavor. So I'm really driven by flavor. It has to be very flavorful and complex. So for white wines, there are certain white wines I love, like Viognier, and red wines I love, wine styles from the Rhone Valley in France, which means there are blends of different grape varieties, so make the wine more interesting to me.
Right. I need to find some nice white wines because here I can find some which are more like sweet, and that's complex in some ways, but I will try to find those. Thank you. Traditional descriptive analysis or rapid methods?
It depends. It depends of the goal. I mean, the thing with sensory, you need to have an objective and an action standard. So if I want to explore and I have a quick reading of a category, I love rapid methods. If I really want to connect the sensory attributes with preferences, with chemical markers, with biological markers, I need a very precise traditional descriptive analysis. So it depends.
Okay. Croque Monsieur or Croque Madame?
Croque Monsieur.
Okay. Tetra testing or triangle test?
Oh, it depends again on the product. But I would say with tetrad because I never really liked the triangle.
Okay. 9 points or 7-point scale for consumer testing.
9 points, but I prefer linear scales.
Okay, academia or industry for working
And
maybe.
I sit in the middle, but after 30 years of experience, I would choose industry. 100%.
Perfect. Analytical or consumer testing?
I think I'm more an analytical person by training and in my heart, but I love consumer testing too.
Yes, it's fun. Parametric or non-parametric statistics?
Parametric. I've been trained by Pascal Schlich, remember?
Oh, yes. Yes. Crème brûlée or mousse de chocolat?
Ah, mousse au chocolat.
Preference mapping or PLS?
Don't really have preference. I've seen more results with PLS, more good results with PLS, yeah.
Okay. French wine or Californian wine?
French wines.
Thank you for your answers.
You're very welcome, Ivan.
Okay, let's go to the final part of the interview. For those people who is starting their career, can you describe your career path or how to become a specialist in this field? Can be wine specialist or sensory specialist.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question because depending on where you are in the world, you don't have the same options. And one of my big regrets is that sensory science is not always taught in the undergrad level in the university. It's, to have an in-depth training, it's usually at a master level. And there are only few schools that really have a degree in sensory science. And the only chance to really learn sensory is hands-on, and being able to do an internship in the industry or with a professor at the university. And at the university, they will probably see only the research side, not really the business side, which is another aspect of, I think, an opportunity for academia to improve the training of future sensory scientists. But find a mentor, find somebody who can train you, and be curious, ask a lot of questions, because sensory science is more than just filling cups and coded cups and serving participants. It's much more than that, yeah.
Right. What will be the minimum skills or in order of handling people, technical knowledge or statistical knowledge, whatever, if that a sensory scientist requires?
Yeah, that's also a good question, because this is very a multidisciplinary field. You need to be good with people, so you need to have some training in psychology and moderating discussions. You have to be comfortable with conflict, because if your panelists don't agree, it's not easy. But you also need to have a vision, be creative, and being able to problem solve problems, because there are always things you need to fix in research, because sensory science is mainly in R&D. And yes, you need to learn to like data, because the output of your test are data that you need to understand and being able to communicate, and then you need to know how to communicate so that you can sell your results. So I think you don't need to have it all when you start, but these are the skills that you need to develop, both technical and what we call soft skills, in order to be a successful sensory scientist along your, in your mid journey.
Right. And in your opinion, what will be the most, let's say, problematic or difficult part of the sensory in the sense of this is something that must be fixed in some way. Is there any part or not?
One of the biggest challenge is to have your management, supporting you. So when the management executives are in full alignment with the value of
Mhm.
sensory, it's a soft journey. When you
Yes.
have to fight to get your voice heard, it's always challenging. And whatever the field you are in, but
Yes.
in academia or in business, that's a challenge. But what I think is a problem is that I was listening to former interviews of yours, and I heard Mame saying, in Africa, um, people are not, really fully versed in food science and
Right.
sensory. I would say, well, it's in many countries, in many continents, and you still, you have to continue, teach people about the value that you bring, and but this is part of the job. And
Right.
what I find in the wine business, when I say to people who are in hospitality, dealing with customers, sommeliers or tasting room managers, that I'm a sensory scientist, they look at me like, I'm an alien. So I have to explain what we do, but they don't understand. They don't
Yes.
understand that it's a profession. So we have a lot of work to do to socialize what we are
Mhm.
doing outside of our little sphere of influence, which is, essentially R&D and marketing. But we really need to be more vocal about the value that we bring.
Right. Right. Thank you. Let's say we have a time machine, and
Ooh,
well, in this case, you can travel back into that exact time when you are deciding to go for sensory or not.
yeah.
Uh, do you or will you tell something to Isabel to do?
Well, I will tell Isabelle that she did the right choice. Um, Maybe, I could have maybe taken, other courses, etc. But I think on the technical side, I was very lucky to have learned from two amazing mentors, Sylvie Sanchou and Pascal Schlich. Uh, how, However, in the business world, if I have one regret is not having found a mentor to help me navigate, the business world and helping me, you know, show the value of what we were doing in sensory. It took some time for me to have the right tools and the right pitches to do that. So if I could have accelerated that, maybe that would have been
Okay.
nice.
Do you think nowadays it's easier to have a mentor?
I don't know.
Or
It was not in the French culture at the time. I know when I moved in the US, I mean, it's kind of part of the corporate journey. Everybody
Mhm.
has a mentor, but it was not really part of my education. But you just have to ask. And what the worst thing they can say, well, I'm sorry, I don't really have time to have, another mentee, but just ask. And if anybody wants a mentor and I have time, I would be happy to consider it, because a mentor is just like bouncing ideas, help you connect with people. And it's
Right.
not about doing your job, it's really helping you think differently as well.
Right. Yeah, as you mentioned, you just need to ask. I mean,
Yeah,
you are dealing with sensory people, so it's normally sensory people is really nice, most of them, right?
very
Yeah.
open, yes.
Finally, Isabel, do you have a sensory book, paper, poster that you want to suggest for the people who
Yeah,
is seeing us?
I don't know if you see that one.
Ah, perfect.
So sensory evaluation techniques, sixth edition. I have the third one, and I had this one, and I really cherish it because I have the three authors
Ooh,
that have written a testimonial including our late Morten Melgaard. So this is the book I usually recommend for anybody who wants to start learning about techniques. But there is also a paper that uh, Eb Custer wrote about the psychology of
mhm,
food choice and the fallacies, the five fallacies that many people fall into, and definitely would recommend to read this paper before deciding on your journey, and
Right.
because it's still very relevant today.
Nice. Yes, I agree. Isabel, it's time to say goodbye at this time. We have
Okay,
to finish this talk. Thank you so much
thank you.
for your time and for sharing your sensory perspective and history, of course.
Thank you so much, Evan. It was a fun conversation.
Me too. Okay, see you next time then. A
Okay,
ustedes, muchas gracias por vernos. Nos vemos en la siguiente ocasión. Si les gustó el video, denle like y si no, no digan nada. See you. Bye bye.
bye.